The smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables clung to the air at the nursing home. And as I wheeled my mother back to her room with Miriam at my side, I didn't notice the folded piece of paper that slipped from my jacket until my wife bent to pick it up, her fingers brushing the floor, her eyes scanning the words that Elena had scribbled, "Meet me after visiting hours." Same place, and in that instant the fluorescent lights hummed louder, the hallway narrowed, and my undoing began with nothing more than ink on lined paper in the wrong hands. Miriam froze, still holding the paper as though it might burn her, her lips parting but no words coming. And I felt my heart hammer against my ribs because the affair I'd been balancing between duty and desire had been dragged into daylight by a single careless note. Elena was not supposed to bleed into this world. She belonged to the quiet corners of the library where she worked, to the stolen lunches off South First, to the motel with the humming ice machine where we had built a secret rhythm. But now she stood in the middle of my mother's nursing home like a ghost summoned without warning. My wife's knuckles whitened around the note, her eyes cutting into me sharper than any accusation, and I stumbled for words, blaming a mix-up, a volunteer, a staff member, but Miriam knew, wives always know. And her silence hurt more than shouting would have. The rest of the visit blurred, my mother asking why Miriam looked pale, me fumbling with the wheelchair brakes, the television in the common room blaring a game show while Miriam folded the note into her purse as if tucking away evidence for a trial to come. Driving home, she didn't speak, just stared out the window at the neon of gas stations and taco joints flickering against the humid Austin night. And every mile stretched tighter until the car felt smaller than a coffin. At home she finally turned, her voice low but steady. How long? I couldn't lie anymore. I told her months, not years, though even that shortened truth was enough to crack 40 years of marriage in one breath. She walked into the bedroom, closed the door softly, and I stood in the kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator and the faint lavender scent of Elena still on my shirt collar, realizing I had destroyed not just trust but the very ground beneath me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like Miriam leaving, every shadow like Elena waiting. And when dawn seeped through the blinds, Miriam emerged, suitcase by her side, and said without looking at me, "You brought her into my mother-in-law's nursing home. There's no place left that's safe from your lies." Then she walked out, the door shutting with a finality that left me in a silence deeper than death, clutching the image of her fingers around that note, the slip of paper that turned my hidden affair into a confession written in her eyes forever. The morning after Miriam left with her suitcase, the nursing home called to remind me about my mother's appointment with the cardiologist. And I almost didn't go, too ashamed to show my face where the secret had unraveled. But habit and duty pulled me in. The halls smelled the same: bleach, instant coffee, loneliness, and every corner reminded me of Miriam's eyes when she read Elena's note. My mother asked where Miriam was, and I mumbled about her visiting our daughter in Dallas. But even in her fog of age she squinted at me like she knew better. After settling her in, I walked past the volunteer desk and froze. Elena stood there, not in her librarian's cardigan but in plain clothes, holding a clipboard, smiling faintly at the receptionist. She had signed up as a weekend visitor, helping residents with reading. When her eyes met mine, something unspoken passed between us: guilt, hunger, dread. I wanted to pull her aside, demand to know why she'd slipped that note into my pocket so carelessly, why she'd risked everything, but before I could move, a voice came from behind me. "Daniel, is that her?" It was Frank, my neighbor, pushing his father in a wheelchair. His gaze following mine to Elena. His tone was casual but sharp enough to slice. Panic crawled up my throat. Elena gave the smallest shake of her head, a plea to pretend. To deny, but the air around us already felt poisoned. I muttered something about a volunteer from church, and Frank raised an eyebrow. Clearly unconvinced, my mother coughed from her room, breaking the moment. But the damage had spread like a crack in glass. On the drive home, Frank's words echoed. And my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you want to keep this quiet, meet me tonight, parking lot 9. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Elena had shifted the battlefield, and whether I showed up or not, the silence around us was gone. The parking lot behind the nursing home was half lit by a single buzzing lamp when I pulled in. At 9, sweat beading along my temples though the night air was cool. And Elena stepped from the shadows in that green dress she always wore when she wanted me to. Remember desire instead of consequence, but her eyes carried no warmth, only warning. "You have to control your neighbor," she said before I could speak, her voice low, urgent, as though the asphalt itself had ears. She explained Frank had asked her name after I left, pressed too many questions. And she feared he'd connect her to me. Worse. She admitted the note hadn't been careless at all, she had slipped it into my jacket. Deliberately, certain I'd hide it better, certain Miriam would never see. My stomach twisted, realizing the betrayal wasn't just mine anymore. It was a choreography she had written too. I wanted to demand why she'd risked everything, but headlights swept the lot and a car slowed, pausing a beat too long before rolling past. And Elena grabbed my wrist so hard her nails dug crescents into my skin. "They're watching," she whispered, though I didn't know if she meant Frank, Miriam, or someone else entirely. I pulled free, heart pounding, and told her this had to end. But she only smiled with a bitterness I hadn't seen before and slipped a folded photograph into my hand, a picture of me and Miriam from years ago at a church picnic, the edges frayed. Miriam's smile bright, my arm around her waist. On the back, in Elena's looping script, were the words, "You can't love us both. Choose before someone chooses for you." Before I could answer, she vanished between parked cars, leaving me staring at a piece of my own history rewritten in another woman's hand. When I got home, Miriam's car was in the driveway though I hadn't expected it, and inside, lights burned in the kitchen. She was at the table, papers spread before her, bank statements, receipts, my phone bill. She didn't look up when she said, "Tomorrow we talk." All of it. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, and the photograph in my pocket burned like a brand. I barely slept that night, the photograph searing my pocket like contraband. Miriam's calm voice echoing louder than any scream could have. By morning the kitchen still smelled of the coffee she'd brewed. The same dark roast she'd always bought from the corner market. But the ritual was different now. She poured a cup for herself, none for me. Her silence sharper than words. At noon she sat across from me at the oak table, spreading the papers she'd collected, a hotel receipt from Bastrop, a florist charge I'd forgotten, a phone bill with Elena's number circled in red. She asked no questions, she only slid each sheet toward me as if laying evidence at trial. My throat dried, and I admitted what I'd done, months of lies, afternoons stolen, promises broken. Miriam listened without interruption, her hands folded, eyes steady. Until I fell quiet. Then she reached into her purse and placed Elena's photograph on top of the pile, the one Elena had pressed into my hand the night before. My heart stopped. Miriam tapped the back where Elena had written, "Choose before someone chooses for you," and asked, almost gently, "Did you think I wouldn't see how deep this went?" I stammered something about mistakes, about confusion, but Miriam cut me off. "No, Daniel. You didn't make a mistake. You made a life with her, while still living mine." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Miriam's gaze didn't waver. She whispered, "That will be for you." When I opened the door, Frank stood there, his face set, holding the same notebook Elena had once shown me, its pages swollen and frayed. "Found this in the trash behind the nursing home," he said. "Figured you'd want to know what people write about you." And with that, he shoved it into my hands, leaving me in the doorway with Miriam behind me. Elena's script tangled with mine, and the sickening realization that the walls of my double life were collapsing from every side. The notebook trembled in my hands, its cover damp, smelling faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, as if someone had tried to scrub away its sins. Miriam stayed seated at the table, arms crossed, watching me flip through pages filled with Elena's handwriting, snippets of poems, sketches of my face half erased, notes about nursing home shifts, and one line that made my stomach twist: "He belongs to two lives, but one will bury him." I looked up, expecting Miriam to demand answers, but she only said, "Read it carefully. Every line is a mirror." My chest tightened as I saw our dates marked in the margins, hotel names underlined, even notes about my mother's declining health woven into Elena's thoughts, like she had been preparing to own every part of me. Before I could speak, Miriam pushed back her chair and left the room, suitcase already packed, her footsteps steady as if she'd rehearsed this exit. I wanted to run after her, to beg, but the door slammed just as my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text that read, "Page 73. I turned there with shaking fingers and found a photo taped inside, grainy, taken from a distance, of me and Miriam walking into the nursing home weeks earlier. Elena's scrawl beneath it, "She sees more than you think." My pulse roared in my ears. The doorbell rang again. Through the window I saw Elena herself, rain dripping from her hair, staring at me with eyes that dared me to open the door. While behind her at the curb Frank's truck idled, headlights cutting through the storm. Both waiting, both knowing, and I stood frozen in my own living room, holding the book that had already told me the ending. Rain hammered against the roof as I opened the door, and Elena stepped inside without waiting. Water pooling at her feet, eyes blazing not with desire but with something sharper, possession. Maybe desperation, and she spotted the notebook in my hands immediately. "You weren't supposed to let her see it," she hissed, shaking droplets from her hair, her voice low enough that even the thunder outside couldn't drown it. I asked her straight, my voice cracking, if she had been following us all along, taking those photos, planting notes like traps. She didn't deny it. Instead she leaned closer, whispering, "You were never going to choose. So I chose for you." The words chilled me more than the storm. Before I could respond, Miriam's car headlights swept across the driveway, her silhouette visible through the windshield as she sat there, not moving, just watching the house. Elena's face hardened. "She knows already," she said. "The only question left is which story you'll tell her, mine or yours." Frank's truck idled still at the curb, his figure faint behind the rain-smeared glass, a witness to a scene I no longer controlled. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Another text, this time from Miriam. If you open that door to her again, don't bother opening it for me. My hands shook so hard the phone nearly slipped, the thunder rolling like judgment overhead. Elena reached for my wrist, the same grip that once felt thrilling now like a shackle. Decide now, Daniel, she said, eyes unblinking, because tomorrow there won't be a choice. And at that moment, with Miriam's headlights piercing the rain, Frank's silent watch from the curb, and Elena's fingers digging into my skin, I realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the one I had invited into my home. Elena's grip burned into my wrist as if she could fuse me to her. But when another flash of lightning lit up the room, I saw Miriam's outline still sitting in the car, unwavering. And the choice I had dodged for months pressed down so heavy my knees almost buckled. I pulled free, voice hoarse, "You need to leave," but Elena only laughed, low and bitter, and stepped deeper into the living room, dripping water onto the rug Miriam had chosen years ago at a flea market in San Antonio. "You think she'll forgive you? She's already gone," she said, pointing toward the driveway. My chest tightened, torn between rage and panic, but before I could speak, a knock thundered at the doorframe. Frank had gotten out of his truck, rain plastering his shirt, his jaw set like a man ready to step in. "Enough, Daniel," he barked, eyes flicking from Elena to me. "This circus ends tonight." The room spun, 3 lives colliding under one roof that had once been a sanctuary. Elena crossed her arms, daring me to deny her. Miriam's headlights cut through the blinds, unblinking. And Frank stood waiting for me to claim the wreckage. My mouth went dry, words shriveling, but the silence was louder than any confession. For the first time in my life, I felt what it was to be fully cornered, not by fate, not by love, but by my own cowardice. And as the storm raged outside, I realized no matter which door I opened, I was already walking into the ruin I had built with my own hands.